guess I should mute myself. I have music too. You guys let me know how this sounds. Make sure I can hear it. Can you hear it? Ah, shoot. Hang on. How about now? Okay. Here they come.
I climb the city's ladders to seek, not to gather. I'm letting go now, please don't let it matter. I'll tell you why, if you take your shoes off. My strangeness, I drew a bath, but nothing changes. The officer suggests a cup of coffee. I covered it up, I maintained my silence, but others who knew sang out like sirens. My troubles, they just boiled into song. It's in my head, I'll be fine. Nothing heals like a little bit of time, but time refused to settle. First it was shudders, I shuddered the word. Then it was sleep, I don't sleep anymore. Now I just dream till I can't. I can't dream anymore. I fall down to my bathroom floor, and I'm praying for truth. And I don't believe in God, but I believe in you. And I don't believe in God, but I believe in you.
We've got goats up on the rooftop. We've got whitefish in the bay. We've got spotted cows to fill our cup at the end of every day. A white gull roosts at the end of Main Street. We're just a block from summertime. Autumn days that flow like water. Winter nights that glow like wine. We've got
All right, friends, I think
by
we're gonna
the
get
fire.
started here. I'm gonna do this very gentle fade out as much as I'm loving listening to the band The Red Sea Pedestrians, which is Ian's band, our illustrious speaker today. So screen share, stop. Everybody wave hi for a moment. But I spotlight myself. My favorite thing to do. Not. Hi, I'm in a mood today, so bear with me. Actually, I'm in a quirky mood. I'm excited. I am super happy that my pal Ian Gorman, everybody's pal Ian Gorman, is back today to share more of what's going on in that brain of his, in his stellar world of home recording and actually his recording studio now. Um, but before we get to that, a little bit of business. Just a reminder that we are live on Facebook at or at Folk Alliance Region Midwest Facebook page. If you are out there watching, great. But if you would like to join us in the room, which is where we're probably going to do more of the chatting, feel free to go to farmvirtualconnections.org. You'll see the registration there. Otherwise, I think our pal Nicholas James will be out there watching the Facebook chat. If you have any questions, you can drop them in there and he'll let me know. But I've just sailed right past where you are. Most of you know this, but if this is your first time joining us at Farm Virtual Connections Tuesday Tech Talk, welcome. Where have you been? This is probably, we're coming up on a year, not quite, but we've been over 10 months at this. And we've been meeting almost every single Tuesday with a new topic of some sort of tech that we're working on. And sometimes we stray a little bit away from tech, but we've been doing community peer sessions and these tech talks and other webinars and gatherings to help keep our community connected while we are not able to meet in person. So please visit farmvirtualconnections.org for a lot more information and farmfolk.org for even more info. You are not able to chat with anybody but me or our hosts. I'm going to ask you to focus your chat questions right to me, not to Ian, because I would like to filter the questions. And if you would prefer to ask your question, raise your hand by your voice. I would like that very much if you would like to ask your question yourself. So use the raise hand feature, which you'll find in the now it's in the reaction section. Hopefully by now you've all updated your Zoom app, and that little thing at the bottom of your screen that says reactions. If you click on that, there's a bar across the bottom of that says raise hand. So you'll use that if you have a question. That'll bump you up to the top of my list and I'll see that. If you can't find it there, check in the participant window in the lower left corner. There's a little blue hand, so you can do that. I am going to, without further ado, hit the record button because I just thought of it just now. We're recording. We are now recording officially. So I am getting coffee. So everybody say thanks, Rod. My barista has shown up. So today's talk is a continuation of one we did a couple weeks back on home recording with Ian Gorman. He did home recording basics, and there was so much information, and we kept going well past the hour. And we are back here because there's a lot more questions and a lot more to address. This topic could go on for months, I think. But so we're going to dig a little bit deeper today and have mostly just Q&A through the whole session. And I'm just delighted to welcome Ian. I'm going to add you to my spotlight right now. We can have a little chat. You can unmute yourself, my friend. And we are, Charlie, do you mind manning the waiting room for me? Thank you. Charlie Mossbrook, Farm Board President, everybody. Thank you very much. Say hi, Charlie. We are, we are so happy to have you back. Thank you for coming and joining us again. Ian's background from, I met Ian at a farm of long ago when there was only 60 or so people in attendance, I think. And I think Ian at that time, I'm going to guess you were doing more things like remote. You didn't even have your studio at that point, but I remember everybody talking about Ian Gorman. He's the guy to call if you want to do remote recording of a show, or he'll come to your house and record your album for you. And this evolved into La Luna Recording and Sound, beautiful studio. And I would like to gush just for a few seconds on the musicianship and the beautiful band, the Red Sea Pedestrians, among other things. Ian's also a tremendous musician, so which also I think makes him an extra great engineer. He's got some awesome ears. He's behind 700 plus albums in the course of his career, as far as I know, and that's where I'm going to end my gushing. But thank you so much for coming back, Ian. What's in
My pleasure.
We have a handful of questions up front. And as you and I talked before we went live, we we want to dig into what we are going to cover today and what we might not cover. I know there was one question that came in about live stream sound, and I'm afraid that we are just going to just take that right off the table. If you've got questions about live streaming, that's going to be another Q&A altogether at some point. So we're focusing solely on recording, home recording, albums, demos, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a question that I don't know the answer to, I won't lie. I'll let you know, or maybe I'll lie. And it'll be fun. No, one of these answers is correct. Guess which one? No, I'll let you know if I can't answer it. I don't know a lot about streaming, but I do know about recording, and I know about live sound, and some of that crosses over. If but yeah, I'll just give it my best shot. It's like a game show, but only on stuff that I vaguely know about.
Nice. Nice. Oh, that wasn't you guys?
No, I don't know who that was, but it was sweet. I mean, if you liked it, we could say it's us.
Oh, that was Katie Doll. I'm so sorry, you guys. Katie Doll was, and somebody else was before. Your album is in front of me. See, this is how techie I am. We should do a tech talk on Spotify and how to play an album. What was apparently last in my list was, wait, what? Oh, I'm sorry. So anyway, I apologize. Well, go look up the Red Sea Pedestrians, everyone. Sorry, back to the questions. I told you I was in an odd mood today. So we're gonna kick it off with a question that came in from Dennis Kingsbury, I think, because I think it's a great place to start. He was talking about effects and the order in which you add them. And I'm going to get right to his exact wording so I don't misspeak. Although I could misspeak and then force him to ask his question directly. His is a two-parter. It said, what order do you apply effects such as EQ, compression, reverb, etc.? And then I'm going to give you part B in case it's somehow related. He says, what effects do you apply to individual tracks and what effects do you apply to the final mix? So we're going to just dig into effects right off the bat.
Great. Okay, cool. So first off, and you're all going to hear me say this time and time again today, there's no right and wrong with a lot of this stuff. A lot of it is very opinionated, and the decisions that you make are part of your own personality and creativity that you put into things. So you might talk to one engineer that says one thing, and another engineer talks to some that gives you a different answer. And don't let that intimidate you. That's the freedom and the beauty of the art part of what we do. So there's no right or wrong with the order that you put on effects. In general, so let me start with this. There are certain effects that I tend to put on individual channels more often, which are EQ and compression. EQ, just to get to the bare bones, I know a lot of you know this, but I want to make sure we're not leaving anybody behind. EQ is basically a way of controlling the tone of something, the highs, mids, lows, etc. Compression is adjusting the volume of it and compressing kind of the dynamic range, the quiet to loud, and kind of flattening the range of volume with that instrument. So a way to control the peaks or bring up the quiet stuff, that kind of thing. You will also put EQ and compression on your master bus, in other words, on the entire mix, that sort of thing. Use that stuff all across the place in audio. But on an individual track, I'm mixing a song, I've got a vocal. A lot of times, most of the time, there'll be some EQ and compression on it. The order that you put those is totally subjective. Most of the time, I tend to put EQ first and then compression because if, like, for instance, there's a frequency that's really popping out like crazy on a vocal, I might want to tame that frequency before hitting the compression. I don't want the compressor to be reacting to elements of the sound that I don't want in there, right? I want it reacting to after I've cleaned it up and taken out the stuff that bothers me or whatever. But then sometimes, like, say I've got that going on, I'm really happy with it, I love the sound, I want to adjust the EQ some, I might put another EQ on after the compressor because that compressor is affecting the sound. That's giving me the sound that I like. And I don't want to, I want to roll with that. I don't want to undo that. So there's a lot of reasons to do one or the other. but those are some reasons to do one or the other. And then, often on my mix bus, which is the audio term for kind of your master, everything together, I'll often do EQ and compression there as well at that point. And you'll be amazed at how much EQ and compression are done throughout the audio process. It's done in tracking, it's done in mixing, it's done in mastering. It's then radio stations are putting on their own stuff on there. It's happening a million times in the process. Other stuff I'm trying to answer somewhat succinctly here, but it's kind of a big question. Reverbs and stuff like that, those I will often put on separately. Like I'll put on a reverb on its own track, and then I'll send various things to it. So I'm not putting a reverb plugin on the lead vocal track. You could certainly, but for me, I find there's a lot of benefits to putting that on its own track and then sending stuff to it, kind of sending a submix of stuff, a little bit of guitar, a little bit of vocal, the violin, sending all of that to one fader that has the reverb on it and mixing that in. And that's probably the most common approach you'll see in professional audio. And there's a lot of reasons for doing it that way, but there's no right or wrong. You toss a reverb plugin on your vocal and you're happy with it, cool, do your thing. But that's how I do it.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm going to throw in Sherry just came in and said, and I'm not sure if this got clarified, but she was asking about clarifying the difference between printing the effects while recording and adding to the track later. And I think that's kind of the difference, right? Versus if the question was about adding to individual tracks versus a whole mix rather than while recording versus mixing. So I think she's asking, are you adding that reverb during the recording process versus afterwards?
Right. I will add EQ and compression during the recording process. I'm a big fan of that. And here at the studio, we have a lot of beautiful analog outboard gear. And so I'll go through that on the way into the computer and use that stuff. I'm personally a big fan of getting the sound right now. There's kind of two different camps in the audio world. One is that where kind of like you're committing to sounds, you're doing stuff up front, that kind of thing. The other is like doing everything real clean and giving yourself a million options later. I don't really like that second option so much. Now, keep in mind, another engineer that might be just as good or better than me might love that option. So, you do you. But for me, building a mix is all about puzzle pieces and everything working together. It doesn't matter what they are like on their own in a vacuum. Everything needs to work together. You don't really know what kind of bass sound you need unless you have a general idea what kind of drum sound you need and that kind of thing. So I like to build it as I go and to a point commit to sounds. When I say commit to sounds, I'm talking usually EQ and reverb. And when I say to a point, I mean, I don't want to paint myself into a corner and do something really extreme I'm going to regret later unless everybody's feeling really adventurous and down for it. I'll do a little bit of compression, I'll EQ to my taste, and I'll print that way because why not, is my opinion. I want it to sound good now. I don't want to imagine it sounding good later. I want it to sound like a record in my headphones when I'm singing into the mic. You know what I mean? So I'm a big fan of doing that stuff. Plus, it's also a budgetary concern for bands. The reality is most major label huge albums spend so long mixing. I mean, 1 day per tune is common, and I mean a long day per tune. Most people I work with don't have the budget for that. When we get to the mixing stage, I can't be starting from scratch and saying, okay, I'm going to bring up the kick drum and solo it and tweak that. They just don't have time for that. It's already got to sound good. The mixing stage has got to be finessing and kind of taking it to the next level, not starting from scratch. So I'm a big fan of committing that stuff. But I usually don't commit reverbs and that kind of thing. For one thing, like since I use those in the computer, I can run those live and have them on a separate track and, keep them or ditch them later. I don't have to commit to them. There's not really any reason to. So this is really up to your own working style. Like I say, I'm a big fan of making decisions as you go and shaping the sound as you work.
Yeah. You and I had that talk before too. It's like making sure that you're getting the good stuff on the way in and not necessarily fixing it in with a bunch of plugins, which is the big word because you said it.
Well, I am a big believer that great sounding records happen in sound check, not in the mixing stage. Right. Take your time up front. Make sure you have the right mic, at least from what you have access to, in the right position, right distance. And when I say right, I mean what sounds good to you. There's no right or wrong here. But those decisions are going to have more of an impact on your record than any plug-in or knob that you turn. The right mic in the right spot is always going to sound better than the wrong mic or the wrong placement on it with a bunch of mixing done later to it. So take your time. When I work with bands coming in the studio, we take a few hours if it's a full band. Take a few hours, set everything up, do sound checks, bring the band in to listen. You happy with that guitar tone? Oh no, I want it to be a little bit brighter. I want it to be a little bit fuller. Cool. Let's move the mic. Maybe that's not the right mic. Maybe we're swapping that out. That's when so much of the weight of these decisions comes into play. You don't just toss a mic up in front of something because it was advertised being a good vocal mic, and so you put it in front of something and then you do it all later in the mix. The stuff you do up front means more than anything else. And the thing is, so many people in the folk world, in the rock world, in the soul world, all kinds of stuff, have this huge romance of vintage recordings and Me Too. A lot of my favorite records are the old records. And people think like, oh, is that because they're using old tube mics or is that because they're using tape? No. I mean, yeah, that stuff does something for sure. And there's a reason why we have tube mics and tape around here. But the thing that makes those records sound so great is that they didn't have a million plugins, so they had to pick the right mic and put it in the right spot. And so you start that way, and everything else follows.
Yeah. And I think actually this leads really nicely into our next question, which I do want to get to plugins because I'm, very curious about I know there's a lot to talk about there and unpack, as it were. But this question came in. I'm sorry, I don't have the name in front of me, but we were talking about how her acoustic guitar, she says it always sounds really great live, but when she's in the studio, or on the sound recordings, it always sounds like caca, bass distortion, no amp. So I think you touched on that there, but just in getting a very specific, like how to get good sound out of an acoustic guitar and maybe, I mean, an electric guitar with miking an amp or whatever, all that stuff. Like there's some finesse there, yeah?
Absolutely. So without knowing this woman's particular recording circumstance, I can't say why her recording isn't sounding good. There's a lot of reasons why that might be. But I'll give you some of my approaches to miking an acoustic guitar. Well, first off, let's talk about mics versus direct outputs. Um, a lot of people use direct outputs or DIs, line outs, whatever you want to call it, live, and it's most of the time it's a really, really necessary thing in a live setting. Because you get tons of feedback problems if you try to mic a guitar live. Now, you might be able to get away with it if you're in a really well treated room where the crowd is really quiet and you have a great sound team and nice equipment, that kind of thing. Cool. But, for most of us slogging it out in the clubs and, bars and all that stuff, you put a mic in front of a mandolin and good luck. You know what I mean? So you need to use direct outs live a lot of times just to get heard because my opinion is what good is a great sound that nobody can hear? Like, yeah, keep it real, put a mic in front of it, but if nobody can hear you, who cares? What are you doing? So, um, but that being said, I do think mics sound much better than most DIs. Some DIs are really impressive and they keep getting better. But in the studio, I'm a big fan of using microphones instead of DIs on most instruments. There are exceptions to everything. But so first off, if you're not using a microphone, you're just trying to take a direct output, try using a microphone and see what that does for you. Secondly, is what is the quality of the microphone? And is it a good match for your guitar? Something that is endlessly frustrating for some people is that there's no such thing as this is a good mic for this and this is a bad mic for this. There are things that tend to be that way and good starting points, but I one of the reasons that studios have so many freaking microphones is because you put a mic on person one's guitar and it sounds beautiful, and you put it on person two's guitar and it's totally not the right fit for them. Whether it's their tone as a player, whether it's their instrument, whatever. So you might want to make sure that you like the sound of that microphone on your guitar, and then you get into placement, and this is such a big thing: is where you place it on a guitar. Let me grab a guitar from the other room. I don't have an acoustic here, but we'll make do with an electric. I'll be right back. Give me 1 second.
Okay. You'll make do with an electric. And Mark Smith, I know you're out there and you said something to clarify, but I'm going to make you ask your question yourself because I have a feeling you're going to need to clarify yet again. So if you're out there and you're able to do it, do it. There he is.
Okay.
Oh, look at that guitar.
So
Nice.
here's a hollow body. It's like half an acoustic, right?
Yeah.
This is the electric that's okay for folkies to play, right?
Right.
There's a lot of different ways to mic and pretend this is an acoustic guitar. Uh, you know, when you're live, a lot of times, imagine this is a sound hole, of course, where there would be one. A lot of times you're trying to get right up on the sound hole because that's a lot of volume. And the more volume you get into the microphone, the less feedback problems you're going to have. But in the studio, a lot of times this can be really muddy and woofy and boomy and that kind of thing. So a real common place to mic a guitar in the studio is kind of where the neck meets the body, sort of up here, if you can see. And this can get you a little bit more clarity in the tone and that sort of thing. Keep in mind, these are all broad generalizations and your mileage may vary. But also miking down from this side can be nice for some body without all the boominess on the sound hole. And a lot of times when I'm miking an acoustic guitar, I will mic it differently depending on what the production is. If it is a big production where an acoustic guitar is one element of it, maybe I'll just use one mic on that acoustic guitar and go for a mono sound. Whereas most of the time, if I am recording like a singer songwriter or something where the acoustic guitar and the voice are the heart of the whole thing and everything else is fitting around it, I'll go for a bigger acoustic guitar sound and maybe use two microphones and do stereo. So I'll do a left down here on the body and a right up here somewhere, and then pan them left and right, either fully left and right or slightly left and right, whatever to your taste. And so it also depends on what you're going for, you know. And if you're miking up an acoustic guitar for a bluegrass song, it's going to be a different sound than if you're doing like a finger picked super mellow thing. You know what I mean? Um, uh, and and I keep talking about how puzzle pieces, how I think about sound as in puzzle pieces, and this is a great illustration of that. If if you're just doing an acoustic guitar and vocal, that guitar can be the biggest sound in the world and take up all the space, right? The acoustic guitar is basically the band behind the vocal. But if you got a five-piece bluegrass band, you can't have that huge of a guitar sound because it's not going to leave room for other stuff. So you got to approach it differently. You got to make room for other things and make sure you have balance and space and all of that. So yeah, why does your guitar sound bad? I'm not sure, but try using mics if you're not, and if you are, try moving them around. Try different mics if you have access to them, that kind of thing. Really experiment with mic placement. You'll be amazed at what a difference moving a microphone 1 inch can do to the sound. It can sound like a totally different mic depending on where you put it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I was just going to say experimenting, right? With that. But you've brought up, and I'm sorry, we're going to delay plugins one more time because you keep bringing up, which something that I really appreciate is that and Mark Smith is asking a question about multi-tracking versus, you know, there's a couple of parts of this. So there's analog, there's still old school style analog to tape recording where, in that case, most of those people are doing a full band live because it's more of a pain to do multi-tracking. I don't know if I want to go there, but
That's not the case.
nothing. Okay.
No,
So
people multi-track to tape all the time.
good. Okay. So that I think might be what his question versus multi-track in digital recording. But it is a question of multi-tracking where you record the, bass, record the drums, everything is done separately at different times. You've got a click track and people are versus putting a band well placed and semi-isolated. So can you talk a little bit about that and like your preference? I'm
Yeah.
curious.
All of it is my preference, to be
Oh.
honest. No, I mean, seriously, I'm not trying to be flippant about that. First of all, people argue about analog versus digital, and to me, I don't know how to put it without, it's a dumb argument. I think they're all awesome and they all have their benefits, and I want all the tools. There's no reason you have to choose anymore. You can do it all, whether that's tracking to tape in that kind of analog sense, or whether it's just using a lot of analog gear on the front end and that kind of thing. Do it all. And to me, the most powerful combination is doing the old school approach up front, where you're making sure that you've got the right equipment and you're getting the right sounds up front, and then having all of the toys and all of the messing with ability on the back end with the computer. And we have a tape machine here, and almost all the time when we record a band of tape, we end up putting it in the computer in the end anyway, and doing the best of both worlds, in my opinion. We get that sound of tape and that experience of tracking to it with all of the speed and flexibility on the back end, and I love that combination. All of this being said, all of that stuff, analog or digital, is all so secondary towards what you're doing, your approach, your technique, and the music that's being played. I've heard fantastic sounding digital recordings, and I've heard horrible sounding analog recordings. So that is not what's making the difference in anybody's records. Um, uh, but yeah, so multi-tracking versus doing it all live. When I say I like them both, I really mean that. I don't think that there's a one size fits all answer. Every artist that I work with, part of my job is to do it's a custom job every time, trying to figure out what technique and approach is going to work best for them and realize their vision the best. And sometimes that's a whole band playing together live and getting that feel and kind of that warts and all, like, hey, someone flubbed a little thing, but it's cool. Now don't get me wrong, we can still fix a lot when people are playing together live, but there's some more limitations. I'm just talking the general attitude. And for other people, it works a lot better for them to be doing one instrument at a time and really being deliberate and surgical about what they do. And for a lot of people, it's a combination. The way that my band records, here to tell you some secrets, I'd like to say that every album you've heard by us is us just stepping into a room and playing together live in one take, boom, done. But of course it's not, and 99% of the records you listen to are probably not. What we do is we have the rhythm section play all together live, drums, bass, and then we switch around other instruments, acoustic guitar, banjo, mandolin, whatever else is happening. Those will play together live, and then we will overdub vocals and solos and the more particular things that we really want to have a hand in. And a lot of people I work with use that approach, and it's a great combination because then you get the feel of a live band playing together and people interacting, which not only is a great feel thing, but also just frankly a lot more fun to me to actually play music with my friends in a room, or in separate rooms with headphones. But you get that feel, and then you can dress it up with all the detailed stuff that you want and do multiple takes of the vocal and make sure it's just right and that kind of thing. And anywhere on the spectrum is a great way to work. Like I say, I work with some bands that are 100% live and some bands that are 100% overdub, and a lot of people anywhere in between. The more overdubs you do, obviously you got to be conscious about keeping that feel and keeping that soul in there, and making sure that uh, you're not being so particular about the technical side that you're losing that feel, because the feel's the only thing that really matters. The songs and the emotion behind it, that's what most people hear. They don't hear the mistakes or that you're a little bit flat on this note or that this note is a little funny in the solo. People don't hear that usually. They hear the feel and the song. So you have to be a little bit more mindful of that when you're doing multi-tracking, but that's something you can absolutely do. It is not true that you can't have that soul in a multi-tracking experience. It just takes a little bit more studio savvy and know-how and getting into the zone and vibe in the studio and that kind of thing. But that's a skill that you learn as a recording musician, to be able to still convey that even when you're putting stuff together that way. So anyway, yeah, there's no right or wrong. You really just got to figure out what's best for you and what combination of all that really suits you.
Nice. Good. I wrote some things down here too, and that I love what you said. So I really hope people, these are the kinds of things you have to go back and listen to a couple of times to get a, just
Yeah,
so you remember everything that.
and I'm sorry if I'm talking so fast. These are huge
No,
answers.
no, no.
Talk about this for hours. I'm trying to just get it in.
Yeah, but this is why you're back, because we did, there is so much to say. And I honestly am, personally, it could just be you and me talking. I'm happy all these other people are here, but for me right now, I'm completely, absorbed. I love the idea of this process. I love how different, and I think sometimes how, and Brant's asking a great question that I was going to approach. So Brant, know that I saw your question and I'm coming to it. But
Hey, before you do that, can I just throw in one addendum onto my last answer real
of
quick?
course.
The other thing is you don't have to do all one way or the other. I work with bands that sometimes want to record all live, and it's working great through song 2, song 3, and they get to song 4. There's that one harmony that someone's having trouble hitting live. Cool, we'll overdub that harmony. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like it's fluid and there are no rules. And so you can do whatever works for you. It doesn't have to be all pre-planned one way or the other.
Right. So let's talk plugins, and let's do this both on a kind of high level, just a general idea. Like, what are your top, if you were only could use 3 plugins, right? What are your top 3 must-have plugins? And go ahead and give brand names, everything, whatever. It's fine if they're only good for you, just like and what they do. And then, yeah, then I have a follow-up, but let's
Cool. Uh, yeah. So plugins, like everything else, are super subjective, and one plugin that one person might love, another person might not be into at all. And the other thing is, a lot of plugins have their own sound and their character, and so just like analog gear, and so a lot of times you're mixing and matching depending on the sound. Oh, that compressor doesn't sound good on this vocal, but it sounds great on this vocal. You know, that kind of thing. So it's a hard thing to answer, but here's some suggestions that I have if I was starting out building a system and I could only get a few plugins. FabFilter. It's a company that makes plugins. I love FabFilter stuff. It is all over my mixes. And they have a whole suite of different plugins you can get. You can get a package of a bunch. You can just get one. Their EQ and their compressor are all over my mixes. All over them. Their EQ is, frankly, my favorite. We kind of treat it like the house EQ here. And let me bring up, let me do a little screen share here, if I may. Alrighty. Let's see. Let me bring up a FabFilter EQ here. So you'll see we even have shortcuts to them right up at the top here. That's how much we use them. And the thing that I love about FabFilter is that it is incredibly versatile, but can also be really simple. You can just click and you can just start to drag and just kind of draw in your EQ graph however you like. You can go real tiny, you can go real wide, you can do all kinds of things. It's super fast and flexible. It's really transparent if you want it to be. In other words, you can really just hone in on a tiny little thing and do it. It's got all kinds of bells and whistles if you want to get into the fancy stuff. It can also do dynamic EQ, which changes. It'll EQ more when that frequency is really prominent and less when it's not. It's kind of similar to multi-band compression, if anybody here's familiar with that. It also has this mode where you can bring up a piano scroll. And so, if you're looking for a certain note, you can do that this way. Like, oh, the open D rings out crazy on the upright, as it does on most uprights. Well, hey, you don't need to know what frequency that is. You can find that D on here and just adjust that like that. It's got modes where it can be in zero latency. And latency, real quick, if you're not familiar with latency, computers take a little bit of time to process audio when it comes in and then goes back out of the computer. And there's a lot of factors as to how long it needs to process this, but that time is called latency. This is a whole nother discussion. There's ways you can control it and have shorter latency, or have your computer be more powerful and have longer latency, blah, blah, blah. But the FabFilter plugin will allow you to do a zero latency. So in layman's terms, if you put on headphones, you're talking into a mic through your computer and you hear a weird little delay, that's latency. And so this plugin can run in zero latency mode, or you can boost it up to a more powerful, arguably better sounding, depending on your situation, mode where it has more latency. Super flexible. You can run a ton of these on your session. I'll have dozens of these while a band is tracking, and it works great. Really love it. And then the FabFilter. Let me also show you this. It also. Let me see if I can find a spot where there's some music happening here. It'll show you the frequency response graph. And so you can see here, this note is kind of popping out a little bit. So it's just great. And then I love all the FabFilter stuff. And if I was just stocking a computer with, I only had a few plugins, I'd get a bunch of FabFilter. It's relatively affordable, and as far as studio stuff goes. And one thing that they do that I think is really cool is the more of their plugins that you own, the cheaper the other ones get. Like, whatever, a plugin might be $150 or $200. I don't know what the prices are right now, but then if you already have a few, you log into your user account and that same plugin might be $20 less or $30 less, depending on how many you have. I think that's cool. And then their compressor, let's bring that up here somewhere. I'm going to do a save as. This is an Andy Baker song, if you all know Andy Baker. I don't have the audio. Do I have the audio? I do have the audio patched through right now. Anyway, hopefully he doesn't mind me using this. He made a beautiful album with me back in the spring called North Country Sky that I highly recommend checking out. I think he's one of my favorite songwriters. Anyway, the Fab Filter compressor is also super useful. Once again, really flexible. You can just do basic stuff with it. You can also get into really detailed stuff with it too if you want. Um, so EQ and compression, I would go with those. For reverb, well, it depends on your budget. My favorite reverb plugin is really expensive, and that is, let me bring it up in a way that looks normal here. It's called Altiverb. It is my favorite reverb plugin. It is really expensive though. It's like 550 or 600 bucks. So it's not possible for a lot of people putting together home studios. But if it's in your budget, I highly recommend it. It's my favorite sounding reverb I've ever used in the digital realm. And I was basically, until I found Altiverb, really skeptical about digital reverbs. Like I thought they sounded fine in more like polished, kind of non-natural pop settings, but just going for really natural stuff, it just never was as good as the real thing to me, or an analog reverb. And Altiverb changed that. And what Altiverb does, it's a kind of reverb called convolution reverb. And what that means is, instead of the reverbs just being some algorithm in a box, what they do is they sample real spaces. And if you go through here, you'll see there's all kinds of different spaces. And what they do is they have the technology to just kind of play some beeps and bloops and sweeps through a room and re-record it, and then have basically turn that into a reverb patch. So all of these are the sounds of real spaces, and you can even make your own, which I've done. If you got a speaker and some microphones, you can sample spaces yourself and make your own patches. And man, it sounds natural to me. And also, much like what it's like playing an instrument in a real room, it changes the tone and feel of the instrument. It's not just the tail on it that changes. You know what I mean? It's like when you take your guitar to a different room. You're at Folk Alliance and you're in the big room, and then you go to a little side room and your guitar sounds different. This does that, and I love it so much. They also have, in addition to rooms, all kinds of pieces of gear, plates and springs and all kinds of stuff. And I use this on every mix that I do. I just absolutely love it, but it's really expensive. You're looking to do something cheaper? Well, Fab Filter makes a reverb that I don't have because I use Altiverb all the time. But I bet it's awesome. All of their other stuff is awesome. And there's a lot of good reverb plugins out there. All of this being said, these are all third-party plugins. In other words, stuff you buy separately that you can then load into whatever your DAW is. In case you don't know, DAW stands for Digital Audio Workstation. It's the program that you use. Pro Tools, Logic, Reaper, Studio One, whatever it might be, GarageBand. Third-party plugins is what I'm talking about. This all being said, most programs come with a bunch of plugins that are pretty dang good a lot of the time. And you might not need to buy additional stuff. Yeah, if you really want to get seriously into it, there are benefits and upgrades that you can make to all of that, but it's not going to keep you from creating. If you got a stock EQ, a stock compressor, a stock reverb, hey, it might do the trick. Might sound real good for what you're doing. So don't turn your nose up at that stuff just because it's stock. It's not like you can't make a great sounding record with stock plugins, but the third party stuff, to me, is an upgrade, and there's a lot of benefits to it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna just throw in a piggyback on a couple of things. So, like, David Knoll mentioned that there was even some excellent free plugins out there that you can try. So, my response to the budget statement, which I completely and wholeheartedly respect, it's why I pay an engineer, because I don't want to have to do this stuff. I go in there. But if you are somebody who is motivated to make your own recording at home, think about how much money you're saving by doing at home and not paying an engineer, and then balance like the expense of like buying good equipment and good plugins and good software. If you're going to invest in it, there's going to be a payoff and a point where you're saving money, right? I mean, to a certain extent, that's kind of that would be the balance, I think, in that. So somebody brought up earlier, Brant brought up earlier, pitch correction. And I want you, personally, I will sing a song until I get it right, because I refuse to let somebody use auto-tune on my voice. That said, harmony vocals I feel differently about. And I also know that there are times when you've just gone so late in the process and you don't want to go back and record something and you hear a note that's bugging you. And I've discovered Melodyne. I'm very like, how do you feel about this plugin?
Yeah, so I love Melodyne. That's what I use here the most. If you ask me, long story short, auto tune is great for when you want that robotic auto tune voice, and
Mm.
we do a fair amount of hip hop and pop stuff here where that is a creative decision that people want that sound. But most of the people I work with are looking for more natural sound. They don't want it to sound like there's been any pitch correction, and personally, I find Melodyne to be a lot better for that. I use it a lot. I don't care at all about the ethics of it, if you ask me. To me, it's all kind of and don't get me wrong, I totally respect everybody else's feel on it. If I'm working with an artist that doesn't want to use pitch correction, awesome, I'm on board 100%. Let's do another take. Great. But to me, it's kind of like as soon as you walked into a studio and did take two, you're already kind of messing with things. And so it's kind of like, well, where do you draw the line? On top of that, my opinion on it is that the most important thing in music is the emotion and the human element. And no plugin can give you that. That's what you got to bring to the microphone yourself. We can fix any technical thing. We can move a note around. We can adjust the pitch. We can take the chorus from take two and put it on take one. All of that stuff is just window dressing. The soul of it and the passion is something that you got to bring. And I would always rather take the passionate performance and fix a few things
Yep.
than take a boring performance that's technically correct.
Yes.
If the singer sings their butt off on a track and it just makes my hairs stand up and moves me deeply, yeah, I'm going to fix that note that bothers them instead of asking them to do a second take.
Amen. I hear you 100%.
Yeah.
I agree.
I am putting a link here into the chat. I don't know if this goes to everybody or just Annie, but this is a list of free plugins. There's a website called Pro Tools Expert that is a subset of Production Expert. And this link says free Pro Tools plugins, but most of these work for all kinds of programs. So don't let that scare you if you're not in Pro Tools. It's a huge database of free plugins, and some of them are awesome. There's a lot that we have on our system here at the studio that we use all the time.
Great. And that answers Matthew's question. So, because we talked about this as well, where plugins very software specific, and it turns out that there's, you said a lot of third party plugins are compatible with multiple different DAW systems.
Yep. So there are plugins that will come with your DAW just naturally as part of it, and those might be proprietary to your DAW. But there's a whole bunch of third-party ones that have different formats that work for a lot of different systems. Some plugins might only come in one format that work for one or two programs. Other ones might have a bunch of different formats available to work for a bunch of things. That just depends on the plugin. But the Fab Filter stuff that I keep hyping about is stuff that I think you can find for pretty much any program. Same with Altiverb. A lot of them are. Another plugin that I highly recommend is a company called Massey, Massey, and I'll see if I can find a link here. Massey is a dude. I forget his first name, but his last name is Massey, I think. And he used to work for some of the big plugin companies. I think he worked for Waves or something like that. And then he went solo and just kind of started making his own plugins on the side. And they are awesome and by studio standards, incredibly affordable. And I see them up at top level studios with plugins that cost 10 times the price of these. And I also just like supporting a dude. You know what I mean? He's not a big company. He's just a guy making plugins. I mean, not that I think any plugin companies are like, Microsoft or anything, but you know what I mean? Like, I'm down with that. A guy's just doing his own thing and making plugins on his own, and they sound awesome and they're really reasonably priced. So check out Massey.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to move back to, gosh, here we go, Ian. This is me. Like, I was thinking back to Melodyne and, just some experience I've had. So, uh, the reason that I brought up Melodyne is because in addition to the pitch correction, which I think is awesome because it just the way it works is really amazing. It's about, like if you want to really lock in a couple of vocal takes, like if you got harmony vocals that aren't aligned great, right? Like the way that kind of stuff can happen. But again, I just say philosophically, there's a potential for overusing something like that and making it sound too mechanical and
Yep.
as you say, losing the emotion. So yeah, it's a balance. I wrote that word down, balance,
Yep.
like Leon, you said. So
Yeah, and once again, don't get me wrong. I love people working with people that don't want to use that stuff. Great. Awesome. Let's not use it. I'm never going to push anyone into using something they don't want to use. If we get into a situation where they have a take they just love and there's one note that's bothering them, they're trying it again and again and again, maybe I'll kind of gently be like, hey, maybe let me just try a little thing. What do you think? But I never want to pressure people into that. I always want to respect people's decisions. And honestly, I'm envious of people that can sing without pitch correction. I cannot. A little thing about me. Something I say kind of half joking is the reason I learned how to do all this editing and all this stuff is to make my own albums. So, but that's great. To me, I don't share that kind of, I already gave kind of my stance on it, but the thing about Melodyne and really about any pitch correction is that if you want to sound good, in other words, transparent, like you're not using any pitch correction, you really got to work on it. It's not just tossing it on and going, we're in tune.
Right.
That's when you get the robot sounds and all that. What you got to do with Melodyne is and Annie, since you've used it yourself in certain circumstances, you got to load the sound in and you got to go note by note and that kind of thing. And you got to spend a little time with it if you want to sound right. And sometimes you got to mess. Oh, we put it right on pitch, but it sounds a little funny now. We actually got to go slightly under pitch and there's this vibrato and you got to do it like that. And it's a skill. You got to practice it. You got to get good at it.
I've only watched it done, sir. I have not personally ever it.
Not me, just friends of mine. I'm asking for a friend.
I'm asking for a friend, but I do have a friend who literally on the back of her album cover writes, "No auto tune was used in the production of this record."
Cool.
It's so important to like. So that's not me. I swear to God, not just you.
No. Like I say, I'm totally down with that. And I certainly work with some artists that don't want any of that on their records, in which case, awesome. Great.
Yep, and pull it off. I agree with you.
Yep. But you're right. You do have to be careful, and it can be a slippery slope. The problem is you tune one note, and then all of a sudden the note next to it sounds a little funny, and you got to tune that. And sometimes it can be a domino effect. And other times you can just get, and this is true for so many parts of audio, you can get obsessed about the wrong stuff. Like you start looking at Melodyne, you're looking at the graph on the screen. Oh, this note's a little bit flat, but it wasn't bothering you. You didn't, it sounded fine, but now you start feeling like you got to adjust that because it doesn't look right, and it's really easy to get into that stuff. Yep. And so you gotta watch out for that when you're working in the studio in any sense. You're editing stuff, you're lining up hits of, the drums with the bass or whatever. Don't get into the thing where you start paying more attention with your eyes than your ears. If it sounds fine, it is fine, and you have to watch out. That is how you can get into a slippery slope and start to edit the life out of stuff. And all of us have been in a situation where either ourselves or we've been working with someone that starts editing the snot out of something and all of a sudden it just doesn't sound right anymore. And sometimes the takeaway is editing sucks, takes all the soul out. Well, no, editing doesn't. Editing too much does. And you got to watch out for that. And if you edit too much, it just ends up being a big grid. I had a buddy that worked in LA at some big studios where he was just a Pro Tools wizard, and all of these huge album projects would bring in these super expensive drummers on this ridiculous drum set in this huge room at a fancy studio and record their drums for their record. And then they'd send the files to this dude with the instructions of line up every note to the grid. And he was like, what the hell? Like, no wonder every record on the radio sounds the same, because it doesn't matter who these labels are getting to play the drums. They're having me, this little Pro Tools nerd in the basement, line everything up. And, that's a very compelling argument for why arguably a lot of modern music can be really is a very broad generalization, but a lot of modern pop music on the radio can sound kind of sterile in that sense because people are paying attention to the grid. And his thing was like, look, if a great drummer on a great drum set in a great room isn't enough for you, like, do you not like music? What are you doing? So you got to watch out. You got to make yourself happy to get the edits done that are going to bother you, but don't over edit to the point that you're worrying about everything being perfect. Music's not perfect, and you got to leave some humanity in there. Perfect's boring. We gotta leave some soul in there.
Love it. Okay. So, but we're going to keep, because another question that just came up, which I think was, or a statement, which I know that I have done a number of times. And that is, like you mentioned, doing multiple takes. So, full disclosure, I do all my vocal recordings at home because I can relax and take my time and make sure that I'm getting what I want. So, and what we've done frequently is have a guitar player play 3 passes of a solo, and then we Franken-part it. Like, that's what we always do, just like build a guitar solo. And sometimes we'll go, okay, this is what I want you to play now. Right? Like, it's like composing a part, and the same thing. So instead of auto tuning, do you ever go back and go, oh, well, this other take has the right notes and feel?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. we'll do multiple takes a lot of the time, and you can do that in a lot of ways. It's not just overdubs. You have a band playing all together live in the same room without a click track. You can still often edit between takes and
Mhm.
take, take the bridge from take two and put it on take one or whatever.
Right.
The thing that I just want to throw out there, and of course, this is so opinionated, and this is a folk music community that is, of course, always very focused on organic and natural and all that. In my opinion, all that stuff is fair game in a recording. I free myself from the idea that a recording needs to be just a document of a show, for instance. Now, don't get me wrong. There are great recordings I love deeply that are that are the live arrangement. They're a document of, like Gillian Welsh's "Time the Revelators," Gillian Welsh and David Rawlings, the two of them. The whole record is the two of them, like they're playing live. I love that. I think it's so great. But the thing is, a lot of people I find in the studio have these notions where they're tied into the live performance in the sense of like, oh, this has got to sound just like us live. If we had to do a second take or we got to do an edit, that's a failure on us as a musician. And I don't find that to be the case at all. For one thing, you'll be surprised how many of your favorite artists do a million takes in the studio. You don't know. It always sounds like take one on the record. And nobody ever brags about, oh, yeah, I just spent all night on that vocal. The only stories people brag about is I walked in the studio and walked up to the mic and I was just feeling it and did it in one take. That's awesome. But guess what? A, there's probably a lot of other tunes that they didn't do that on. And B, there's a lot of groundwork laid for that moment. For instance, there's an old saying, I've heard it talk about graphic design, but it applies to all kinds of things in the arts. A graphic designer talking to their client and they give the client the price and they go, well, this is a big price for something that's going to take you an hour. And the response is, well, but it took me 20 years to learn how to do it in an hour. And it's the same thing in the studio. Yeah, I work with musicians that have those magic moments in front of the mics that are just so beautiful and once in a lifetime things. And I treasure that so much. But guess what? They'd been in the studio for hours. They'd been super comfortable. We'd gotten sounds they loved. Their headphone mixes were great. The lighting was right. They had had a nice dinner. You know what I mean? Like it's not like they walked in, took their guitar out of the case and were perfect and left.
Right.
There's a lot that leads up to it. So the other thing is listening to a record for the audience is a totally different thing than going to a show. It's a different thing. If you're at a show, oh man, I miss shows. We all miss shows. You're in a group of people, it's a live in the moment thing. It's this communal thing. A lot of times people listen to records in a different way. It can be a lot more intimate. Yeah, sometimes it's on at a party or whatever in a restaurant, but a lot of times it's you with a set of headphones or, something, or just sitting down, you know, and it's a different experience. So why not keep that in mind to make a different experience as a musician? You don't have to be tied into what's happening live. And it's also an opportunity to realize the thing that's in your head. Yeah, maybe you didn't hit that note that way, but that's how you intended it. Well, let's make it how you intended it. This isn't a live record. This is a capture of your vision as an artist. So all this being said, I'm also totally down for super raw live stuff. But I'm just saying, don't feel chained to that and don't feel that it's a detriment to yourself as a musician if you need a bunch of takes and editing. That's super normal. There's a reason why artists spend months on albums.
I know. I was gonna say I think there's a place for albums, but you want the album to be listenable and radio worthy and whatever, and something that's more than maybe you can get in a live. Sometimes, like, think of all the artists that that go out there and play solo and beautiful, but the album is fully produced with all this glorious extra instrumentation, and you love that just as much, or yeah. So that's a whole nother, like, totally down the rabbit hole conversation. But
Yeah, and I don't want to tell anybody that they're wrong for feeling any way
no,
about it.
no,
Of
no,
course you're not. But I'm just saying you don't have to feel that way. You don't have to feel like you have to feel that way if you don't. You know what I mean? You want to get into recording as its own kind of, it's like there's photography where you're capturing a moment, and then there's an oil painting where you're spending tons of time on one little part of it. And they're both completely legit ways to make art.
it's a really great analogy. I love that. I love that. I think we're gonna get close to wrapping up here because we just have a couple more little comments and questions, and obviously this is a weighted discussion, and who knows, Ian, we may just do this again down the road. I think yeah, I feel really good about not making a home studio. I'm just kidding. Continuing to work with my engineer. No. So Dennis is asking a question which I think is interesting, and I'm this is going to be so try and like just don't overthink this one because I think you're talking about the order of the tracks on the in the um you brought up your Pro Tools session. Like, do you have a preference for like the orders, like how you organize your tracks, like vocals
Yeah.
versus instruments, and like, yeah, is that
Yeah, and there's everybody's got their own thing. Do what works for you. For me, I kind of think of it as a ground up kind of thing. Like I'll put kind of drums on the left and then bass. It's the same way that I I came up using consoles and tape machines at a lot of early studios I worked at, as well as Pro Tools and digital stuff. So I still kind of think of it like that. Think of it laying out the faders on the board, and I'll kind of think ground up: drums, bass, guitar, keys, whatever. The order doesn't matter as long as it's more about getting a shorthand where you don't have to think about it. I'm a big fan in the recording process of separating the geek side from the music side. To me, they're different parts of my brain, and it's like I want to get everything laid out. I want to get everything labeled, ready to go, all of that stuff, and then I can turn off the part of my brain that is worrying about that and just think about the music. So it's more about getting into a habit. Yeah, I know drums are on that side. I don't need to search for the drums. So whatever. But for me, like I'll kind of do drums, bass, guitars, banjo, fiddle, keys, whatever. Yeah, and then vocals usually at the end. And a lot of times I kind of do lead vocal first and then the harmonies. And often in a session, a Pro Tools file or whatever, I'll even separate stuff. For instance, I'll separate the vocals on different tracks for the verses and the chorus, because a lot of times you're treating them a little bit differently. Maybe the chorus, the singer's singing out a little bit more. You need a little bit different of a compression setting, or maybe you want to add just a touch more reverb to that chorus to make it pop a little bit more. So I'll put them on separate tracks. I'll do that often with solos. I'm working with a bluegrass band. The mandolin chops are on one track, but the mandolin solo I'll put on a different track. It's getting mixed totally differently. You know what I mean? It's going to be a different volume, different settings. So I am cavalier with the amount of tracks that I use when I'm splitting stuff up like that. Because to me, it's just a lot quicker. Instead of having to program everything, I need to program all these compression changes for the chorus. No, screw that. I'm just going to put it on a different track. Way quicker.
it's like layers in Photoshop for those graphic design.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I'm going to say this one thing because Michael and Nell were noticing that you're moving your face around a lot. You're just using a Beta 58. What do you got there?
Yeah, I am. And apologies if my voice is changing.
No,
as
no,
I
no, no,
move
no.
around, but
They were commenting just the opposite, that it was
oh,
like amazing how I mean, when you got closer, it was obvious that you were closer, but really you had, it was kind of uncanny.
well, great.
That sounds uncanny.
That's my main talk back in the studio, so I hope so. Yeah, this is just a good old Shure Beta 58, which I highly recommend. Good
Yeah.
workhorse mic that you've seen in a million venues, and you've probably dropped. And there's actually a video online of someone rolling over a 58 with a semi truck, and it's still working. So,
Sorry.
good stuff.
Nice. All right. Well, now I'm going to finish up with Sherry's comment, which I think is pretty great. And also, it kind of goes with me, but I think educating ourselves about this stuff, even if we have no intention of going to this great lengths with the plugins and understanding everything and the really expensive microphones, but educating ourselves as people who are potentially going to go into a studio and record, now we can speak a language, right, that you understand, and it helps to communicate with your engineer. Not that you necessarily know, but it's two sides to that. Also, like, it's a question of balancing your investment, but keeping our engineers who have worked their butts off to know this. And I would much rather give you the work, right? In the same way that I'm going to hire somebody to do a video shoot for me, even though I might be able to figure out how to do it myself, right? So, but still understanding the process and kind of recognizing, like we talked about a lot of options here, like, preferences. And yeah, I mean, you were so good at making sure that we understood that there was no right or wrong way, that it was all about preference. And I think this was an awesome follow-up. So if anybody has any, yes, good. Thank you. Thank you, Patty. We're going to do a big round of applause for Ian, but I'm going to give you, give us any final philosophical words. Oh wait, I just thought of one thing. Nah, you know what? That's going to take us down a rabbit hole. Never mind. My pet peeve, the pick noise. Oh, you talked about mandolin, but man, never mind.
Well, just play with your fingers like an adult.
That's
what
right.
I say. No.
Nice. All right.
Everybody's getting mad with their picks.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, philosophical thing, man. I don't know. I mean, the thing is, recording is really, and I hate to come off as sounding pompous with this, but I really think it's the truth that it's an art form and a craft. It's not just something that you learn how to do and then you know how to do it. I find it's a lot more like playing an instrument, and it's the kind of thing where no two people do it the same way, and there's stuff to learn from everybody, and it's kind of a lifelong quest to find new ways to kind of put yourself into your art and what you do. And that shouldn't be intimidating. That should be freeing and that kind of thing. But all this being said, I am a huge fan of musicians learning how to do stuff themselves, whether it is, to be able to just make their own records on their own, which, obviously as a studio owner, I feel funny hearing myself say this, but I love it. I love people doing their own stuff. And that's how I started. I started learning about this for myself as a musician to better empower myself in the studio. And so you learn about it not just to record yourself, but also to learn more about the process so you can be more in control when you're working with another engineer. The more that you learn and the more that you understand the process and the options and what are possible, the more you can get what you want. And when I work with clients, I try really hard to explain stuff to them, not in a talking down way or anything like that, but as in like giving them the options and making sure that they know that the decision I'm making is for this reason. And if they feel differently, cool, let's make this decision instead, and giving them the power. So the more that you learn about yourself, the more you do it yourself, not only are you going to be able to record yourself, but you're going to get more out of the studio when you're working with other people and that kind of thing. And you're going to be able to communicate better. You're going to be able to get the sounds in your head better, and hopefully not let any jerk sound people boss you around and tell you what's what, because they don't know your art like you do, and you got to be in control of the music that you make all the time.
Absolutely. All right. That was perfect. I have nothing more to add to that. I think it's absolutely right. You need to feel comfortable with the engineer. 100%. And well, I don't know. I hope those of you who are looking to do some recording would, especially if you're in the Michigan, Kalamazoo area, but even if not, oh, Mark's coming back. I don't know what happened to him. He's coming back just in time for us to go to gallery view and wave goodbye. But
Well,
I'm honestly, Ian, thank you so much for coming back. You are a delight and full of info. And I know there's a whole lot more going on in there.
thanks.
You
Yeah,
and I are going to have to get on the phone.
right. Yeah, I can talk about this stuff endlessly. Just a little plug for myself before we take off. Obviously, we're a full functioning recording studio that does tracking, mixing, and mastering, and does full productions front to back, as well as interfaces with people working from home, and does combination projects like that all the time. We work with people from all over the place. We have a great virtual session set up, so you don't have to be in Kalamazoo for us to work together. And I also do private lessons. So if it's stuff you want to refine what you do even more, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to help you out in that way too.
All right, Ian, I have your website, your La Luna recording. It's going into the chat, everybody, as well as the Red Sea Pedestrians, because, well, I feel like that's worth looking into as well. And I'm assuming people can contact you through the website easily.
Absolutely.
So-
Yep, I'm easy to find.
All right, back to gallery view, everybody. Let's give us a big old farm farewell and a thank you waving. Thank you all so much for your contributions and for being here. And as always, send us your thoughts. But we are back together. We are off next week because of the Folk Alliance Folk Alliance International's Folk Unlocked conference. We're not going to do a Tuesday Tech Knock next week, but the following week we'll be back with the talk on webinars. Sorry, our Let's Talk series, where we're just going to everybody show up, not webinars, websites. We're going to Let's Talk websites. Oh, I don't know. Get on the newsletter. And Ron Lewis is here, and Ron Lewis is our resident tax accountant, and he has graciously agreed to do a live Q&A for those of you with your tax questions. They're always changing, friends. So he'll be on hand March 5th. So we'll send more information about that. And we are having a community peer session next week. So we hope you'll join us then. And we have got lots of other stuff in the works for you. Oh, mentor sessions were awesome. We're going to be March 15th. So watch for that for a new batch of mentors. Ian is among them there. So if you want to pick his brain, that's a good time to do it. And that's all I have for you today, folks. Thank you so much for joining us as always. And hopefully we'll see you on a screen somewhere soon. All right. Be well. Be safe, everybody. Bye. Thank you,
Thanks,
Ian.
Annie.